Hello and welcome to Briefly Everything, where we take history and where it doesn't make sense, we'll give you context and puzzle together the pieces so it makes sense. Now today we'll discuss Greece a little bit and then our ancestors language-wise, and we'll also talk about the Indus Valley, or actually what came after. Okay, so let's begin today in mainland Greece, where we have a new people popping up, the Mycenaeans they were called, and that would also make them the first mainland civilization in all of Europe. The Mycenaeans, with their civilization somewhere around here, were in perfect position for trade by both land and sea, and they loved to fight, so they conquered a lot indeed. At this time you still have the Minoans on the island Crete, whom we've talked about in earlier episodes. They were the first Greeks, but they weren't actually mainland Greeks. So the Mycenaeans now and the Minoans would be at war with each other quite a lot, but eventually the Mycenaeans would come out victorious. Okay, so the year is 1600 BCE still, and now around this time we have a new civilization to cash into our memory bank, the Hittites. They lived in the Caucasus, which is this area around current-day Turkey and southern Russia. Their main feat was actually their language, as these people were actually indo-European, which many languages today derive from. We'll get back to these guys in about 2 episodes from now, or in about 300 years, when they've spread their wings a little bit and started becoming very, very influential. It's good though that you hear their name at least now, so you'll get ready for when we start to study them soon. Now let's move 100 years down our line of history. The year now is 1500 BCE, and we won't leave this date for the rest of this episode, so remember that date please. Around this time the Indus Valley is no more, as a new group of people, the indo-aryans, started migrating into this area. And when we're talking about Aryans here, we're not talking about a group of prehistoric Nazis that'll come a little bit later in history. These Aryans now would simply be the successors of the Indus Valley. Okay, so this also marks the beginning of the Vedic period that lasted for 1,000 years. The Vedic period refers to the Vedas, which was a large body of religious texts which has laid most of the foundation of Indian culture and its religion today. The Vedas was written in Sanskrit, and being a self-proclaimed linguist, I find this part particularly fascinating. Let's dig down into this a little bit. Veda in Sanskrit actually means knowledge, and in these texts you'll find a lot written about the king of gods in Hinduism. His name was Indra, but sometimes also called Dios Pitar. Dios here meaning sky, plus Pitar referring to father. Now here's the cool part. In later on ancient Greece, you have their mightiest god, Zeus, sometimes referred to in texts as Zeus Pater, that meaning father Zeus. Okay, and Zeus here actually means sky, and Pater, well, father, as you can guess. So you can actually start seeing the similarity here between Dios Pitar and Zeus Pater. Well, there's no similarity actually, because they mean the exact same thing. The Hindu influence doesn't even stop here, because later on the king of gods in Roman mythology was called Jupiter, which is actually the same word. The first part of the word referring to sky, Ju, or in the Vedas, Dio, and then Peter, well, that sounds pretty similar to Pater or dad. A bit of a stretch still to see the resemblance, but I'm telling you, it's the same word. So these 3 gods from 3 of the largest empires all came from the same word, and they even sound very, very similar to this date. Now Sanskrit and Vedas were the first with their god, mind you, and Zeus and Jupiter became our Western interpretations of that. So I'd argue that the Vedas were quite influential indeed. Now, if you don't care much for religion, you just want to fight and watch action movies like the Mycenaeans, then you might want to watch some Marvel movies, and I'll tell you about Indra in that case, the king of Hindu gods, who actually wielded a hammer and threw bolts of lightning, just like, well, you know who? Thor. So Thor is from Nordic mythology, and that's very, very far away. So how does that make sense then? Well, Nordic people were actually also Indo-European, which we've discussed earlier here. So the lineage makes sense here, and the Vedas has actually influenced this far and wide. So in reality, Thor should not actually be a blonde tall man, but instead an Indian, if Marvel really wanted to get it right. And on that pop cultural note, I shall bid you farewell. Today we've covered the Mycenaeans, the first first mainlanders in Greece, the Hittites, who are the ancestors to the language that I'm speaking right now, and to many, many more. And we've also talked about the Vedas, who succeeded the Indus Valley and more or less inspired the Avengers. I hope you enjoy this episode very much. If you did so, remember you should always subscribe if you haven't already, so you can keep enjoying more episodes. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.